Welcome back to our discussion of the book Agile Principles for Business with James S. Wright. The book is available on Amazon as well as on Kindle and Audible. And I'm here with James once again. We'll be delving into some questions from chapter 6. So James, the title of this chapter is Rules of the Road. Can you explain why do we need rules?
Well, it's I put the chapter in there and I took it out and I put it back in and then I took it out. The book would have been fine if I just mentioned it in 2 or 3 sentences, but in the previously we talked about the difference between facts and principles and policy. So this chapter is an example of what a policy is that someone might set up that would be valid in an agile environment, right? The whole point is that at what point is there, if you don't have any policies, that means you're forcing people to make decisions all day long about recurring events. And if you have too many policies, then you take away their ability to make decisions or to create change, make things different. So there's something in between that's a nice balance between some rules to help people save time without taking away freedom. So that's what this chapter is about.
Nice. So in our pursuit of a more agile environment, we're going to create, so essentially we're creating the rules that we want to have around how we're going to implement agile. That's what you're saying, right?
Well, not only implement agile, but how we do business in general, right? So it could be a rule of this is how we do retrospectives at the end of our sprint, or it could be a rule of this is how we evaluate customers to see if they're worthy to take them on. Or it could be a rule of how do we decide if we want to hire somebody or fire somebody. Again, any kind of rule that you have, any kind of policy in place, if it ever becomes a hindrance to performance, then you throw it out. Or if it ever becomes, you see that you need to make a decision where the principles tell you otherwise, then break the rule. But these are guidelines there to help us move forward and based upon previously decided ideas, to help us go quickly and do well.
So one example of that might be team working agreements, right? So
yeah, this is something that Agile practitioners know well about. I'm sure you have done it many times, right?
Yeah, we've had lots of occasions where, especially with brand new teams, we're trying to establish some kind of a set of common rules that we can say, this is how we're going to interact with each other, right? We're going to expect that everyone shows up to the meetings on time. We're going to have particular ways of operating. Respect each other whenever we're talking during a meeting. Don't talk over people, whatever the rules are going to be. But we try to, whenever I work with the teams to try to set up these working agreements or any kind of rule set, what we'll do is typically we'll have, a limited number of rules at the beginning, just less than 5, right? Because it's easier to remember a smaller number of rules and apply them than to try to come up with a comprehensive list of this is how we're going to approach every single situation that could possibly be thought of.
Yeah, it's always better to have what we call a minimum viable policy list.
Yeah,
you can always add more, but you want to. We know in organizations it's hard to take things away once they're there. One of the big rules when you, especially working with a team, is that you should implement any policy unless the entire team votes on it, right? So only unanimous votes work. And then to remove them, the same thing, only unanimous votes work.
So how do you handle it whenever there's a holdout?
Well, I give them full chance to make their case, just like I guess on the jury. But if we still don't have full unanimity, then you don't implement the rule. I mean, that's that's part of the thing, right? Is you want to make sure that it's something that everybody agrees to. Otherwise, you take away their accountability, right? Once you start imposing rules upon people, now you take away their ability to be fully responsible, right? We're going to get into this detail in accountability chapter, but the more that you impose, the more freedom you take away.
So as the scrum master or as the coach, you might work with the team to modify the proposed rule in order to get it passed, right?
Well, let's give an example, right? So accountability works both ways. If you have a rule that says treat each other with respect, and someone holds out and says, no, I don't want to treat everybody with respect, well, then now you have to consider, should that person be on the team?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's pretty straightforward how these things go. You know, you need people to be honest. This is going to be something they're going to be living by. But in a case where 1 out of 10 people don't agree to do something really basic, well, then you have a clue about another problem that we're deal with. So the whole process gives you a lot of insights into everything else. You know, there's a story I tell 2 or 3 times. I don't know if I've mentioned in the book or not, or if I mentioned it earlier in the series, but when I worked at Lockheed, the company had this rule about what's the right word? Corruption. So you weren't allowed to take bribes. I think most companies have that as a rule. And we had to take this long training about what kind of gifts were acceptable and what kind of gifts weren't. You know, you could accept up to a $50 gift as long as it wasn't cash, but you had to disclose it, you know, after receiving it. Well, and we were all quite grumbly about taking this training. It was like an hour-long training just to do something that we all kind of knew anyways. And then the next month, we found out that one of the senior vice presidents at Lockheed, he was a senior VP of sales, was fired because he accepted $1 million bribe from the Egyptian Air Force he was trying to sell Lockheed jets into Egypt. And, you know, all of us think, I wonder if he sat through, I guess he missed that hour-long class. But what if we had heard in the news that he had been guilty of accepting a bribe and Lockheed hadn't fired him? What would that tell the rest of the company? Right. So you have to make sure that whatever the rules are, that they are respected.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does that work when it comes to the definition of done?
Well, when you define a story, you have to define what done is. And if you're in a team that's doing the same kind of work repetitively, then you don't need to define it every time. You set up ahead of time, you know, what that done is. And it might be a statement about level of quality, or what kind of testing is involved ahead of time, or what kind of documentation is involved, or what kind of sign-off needs to be in place. But it's just something you do ahead of time so that when you write your stories, you just say, you know, standard definition. So you don't have to spend a lot of time. Everybody knows ahead of time what's expected.
Yeah. I had something else I was going to ask there. And I
You know,
forgot what it
so
was.
for example, if you're in a team of people that is, you know, writing content for a website, you know, I don't think you have to have a policy about, you know, no plagiarism, but maybe that's something that you need to remind people that, you know, or it needs to be grammatically correct, or, you know, do your spell check. I suspect that they're going to be a lot more sophisticated about, you know, let the editor look at it first or whatever. But, you know, whatever kind of job you're in, if you're doing the same kind of work repetitively, then you should set up that definition of done for the basic work, so that you don't have to keep thinking about it each time.
Yep, I agree. So you listed a bunch of different rules from different sources here, or policies, I guess you could call them. Which of the which of the sets of rules or policies that you cited in the book do you pull mostly from for your own life? Because I think you probably utilize a lot of these rules for yourself, right? In your
Well,
personal life.
well, the actually the list I liked the most was the one that came from Huntsman, because he had some rules that were very industry specific, like the rule about what kind of price is acceptable by a factory. Now, I've never bought a chemical factory before, but if I needed to, I would look at his rule to say, here's a good guideline. And I think that's kind of the thing I was trying to explain, is that these should be rules that you put in place through experience, right? If you've had a bad experience, if you had some sad background, then you'll learn from it. And so I like the idea of, I don't want to tell people what their policy should be. I don't think, but I want to encourage them that they should do it so it works for them. And so, that's the main thing. Like I had policies about like, how early should I arrive at the airport before a flight? And that policy was as late as possible. I always like to be the last one on the airplane. There were policies I've had in the past about how to do an international negotiation on a large contract. And I had policies about how do I introduce people? I'll give you a really boring one, right? Well, if I'm going to be in a room having a meeting with another company, I have a policy about where I sit. I sit with my back to the door. That allows my visitor to see the door and be comfortable that no one's trying to get signals to me from the outside, or it gives them the first chance to see if someone's coming in. Now, I borrowed that from, basic etiquette in Japan. And I thought that was pretty cool. The visiting team gets to have the best seat is the rule.
That's pretty awesome. So would you agree then that the best policies are based on principles, right? Whatever principles you have for your organization.
Well, I would say the opposite's also true, right? The worst policies aren't based upon principles. Yeah, the whole point is that you think to yourself, what are the decisions I would make in these circumstances? Is this a circumstance that's going to be repeatable or that happens all the time? And that's the case, then that's when you put your policy in place. I mean, do not over policy your organization. It's better to under policy than over policy it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that anybody's ever made policy a verb before, so I get that recognition.
Excellent. All right. So any other rules that you didn't put in the book that maybe you might want to call out here? Or...
Yeah, I made up a list last night as I couldn't get to sleep. So let's see what I got here. Right. So this one I really like. If you have a group of people that get together to make a decision, a significant decision for your organization, then if you're going to change that decision, you have to bring the same people back together again. I remember one time I was at a company, the executive staff, we got together, we made a choice about what we want to do in a certain circumstance. And then like 3 days later, the CEO went the opposite direction and caught all of us off guard, and it created a huge, ugly mess. And I went to the CEO and said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I changed my mind. And we said, no, if you change your mind, you have to come back and at least tell us, right? You just can't go off willy-nilly and create all kinds of problems. Right, if you're in crisis mode, like you got an hour before the customer shows up and your product isn't working, don't spend any time trying to find root cause problems. Just fix it. Just get it to work. You can do. Then the second policy goes with that is, when you have time, go back and find the root cause for your mistake, so you can head off problems in the future. All right, this is one that I don't remember the exact source, so this is not mine, but I like the way it says. It's better to prepare and prevent than repair and repent. All right.
Nice.
This is one I've learned from direct experience. Turn in your expense reports quickly while everything is still fresh in your mind and you haven't lost your receipts yet. That is a really good policy that people should listen to. Also, before you start incurring interest fees on your credit cards. which is something my wife will tell you that is important, because I haven't always followed that policy. Now, I mean, this is an obvious one. Like if you're in a meeting, don't do any personal texting. But you have to let principles, prevail. Like if your wife has sent you a text saying, "Come get me, my car is broken down." Well, you need to see that. You need to do something about it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Now, here's something that when I'm an Agile coach working with teams, they hate me for this. But I have a policy with the teams I work with that says that in the software that we use for managing sprint work, if you don't finish a story, I want to leave that story in that sprint forever. So if you don't finish it, you have to make a copy of it, and then you have to put that into the next sprint. The reason why I want to do that is I want to keep a history of how we performed in that sprint, right? If you finished 15 of 16 stories, or if you finished 3 of 16 stories, I want to remember that forever. Because eventually I want to go back and, I want to see how did we improve in our completion of work. I also want to see in the future, are there any trends for what kind of stories we finished and what kind of stories we didn't finish? That way we can improve and learn from our mistakes. Again, people hate me for that because it's a little bit extra work. But if you don't do that, then you'll never learn and get better.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other rule that I talk about in the book is that when a team asks for something at a review meeting and the request is reasonable, the manager must say yes. Mm-hmm. Anything less is unacceptable. Now, again, a really basic thing to throw out there. Agile frameworks, they're just sets of policies. Yeah. They're not doctrine. They're not facts. They're not anything holy that can't be changed. If you want to implement an Agile framework and you don't like a specific thing, then, if there are principles behind your decision, then go ahead and make the change. And we get into that in section 4 in the book. But, that's all these frameworks are, a set of policies. Yeah. And again, it's better to have fewer policies than more policies.
And if you mess anything up, then the Agile police will show up and beat you with a bamboo cane.
In large companies, they have those. Yeah, I always say there are no Agile police. I meant from the outside, but if you have a highly bureaucratic organization, then you might have some Agile cops on the inside. And I would advise people don't do that. Don't authorize your Scrum Masters or your coaches to be the enforcers. Hold your teams accountable themselves, but give them a policy set that's livable.
Very well. That sounds great. Except for maybe the leave the story in there forever. I think.
So you don't like that either, do you?
I don't know. It's an interesting. I mean, I guess if I'm thinking about it, I probably do kind of like it, but it's not the way that we're doing things right now because it's just the way that the software functions, right?
So that's another rule I have about choosing the software tool for a group. Mm-hmm. Choose the tool that lets you do what you need to, not because you want to save a few dollars, or not because you think it's the cool thing to have, or not because someone told you that's what you should get. You should get the tool that works best for you. There are how many tools out there? 25, 30?
Exponentially more every day.
Well, find the one that works best. Don't just try to be like everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, the one that we have right now, I think it does create a report that you can go back and it'll tell you, here's what you finished, even like the specific stories. This is what you finished. This is what was left over. This is, what you added in. This is what you pulled out by sprint. But the actual story itself will move to the next sprint.
Yeah, and however you want to organize it, I just want at some point in time go back and say, what stories did we not finish? then I want to look for commonalities. Maybe it was because we didn't define them well enough, or maybe because we misestimated them. They were too big, right? You want to learn from your mistakes and get better. And the goal is to get to perfection on completion. You want to finish all the stories you commit to. And until you get there, you want to learn, how do I get there? So, you don't get rid of your detail.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. Anything that you want to raise about chapter 7?
Right. So I'm going to emphasize this a lot, right? When I started thinking about writing this book, I didn't think I'd be writing a book that has a whole lot of strategy in it. But the whole point is, if we want to have people to make decisions on their own, then we have to give them a strategy that they know how to comply with. So that means we had to talk about, what is strategy in an agile environment? What does that really mean? And that's why chapter 7 and 8 and 9, a few others, are in the book. So I think that if you read chapter 2 on iOmega, and at the back is where it sounds like I'm boasting about how smart we were. Well, it's really just because we created this framework on how to look at the future and how to evaluate customers. And that's what's in chapter 7, right? How do you do that? It's something that anyone can do.
Sounds good. Can't wait to read it.
Thanks, Zach.
All right. We'll come back and have another discussion after chapter 7. Thanks, James.
All right, bye.